It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. You're listening to us in your neighborhood, from coast to coast, and around the world. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joan Herman, author, speaker, and your host. For 4 years, Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life has been bringing you interviews with some of the most inspirational and influential people in the world. It's our goal to educate and empower you so you can live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. We have another great show for you today. Joining me is Brett Blumenthal, author of the book, A Whole New You, 6 Steps to Ignite Change for Your Best Life. Brett is here to teach you how you can reinvent your life. In addition to A Whole New You, she's the author of 52 Small Changes, 1 Year to a Happier, Healthier You, and Get Real and Stop Dieting. Brett writes for the Huffington Post and has been featured in print media including the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and she's appeared on NBC, Fox, and CBS, as well as on Martha Stewart's Whole Living Radio. Welcome, Brett. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Joan. It's great to be here.
Brett, so often in life we get stuck, so I'm really looking forward to discussing with you how we can get unstuck and in some cases reinvent ourselves. Brett, what is the difference between change and reinvention? So often we talk about change, but now I'm mentioning reinvention. What is the difference?
Well, with a change, there's so many different scales that we can take on. It can be anything from changing how you eat, so let's say just deciding to cut out sugars in your diet, to larger scale changes. And the larger scale changes is when I start to call that reinvention. The larger, more transformational changes that we make that are going to be extremely impactful to our life is when we start talking about reinvention.
And sometimes I think when people hear the term reinvention, it's very scary to them. So what would you say right in the beginning so that someone doesn't turn this off and say, I can't do this? So what do you say right up front to encourage someone to keep listening?
Well, a lot of us with some aspect of our life find that we are not happy or that we feel like it's not satisfying us or that we feel like it could be better. And I think the idea is to constantly remind yourself that when you think about making a major change or transformation in your life, that the end result is the goal, and that's what's going to make you happier in the end.
And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that we live the majority of our life just in habit form. So much of what we do comes from our subconscious and the habits that we've cultivated when we were young. So it does take a lot of work and a conscious effort to make the type of changes that you're about to discuss.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Brett, you say that there are 3 times in life when we're most ready for change. What are these 3 times?
Well, the reason I say that is because it makes these 3 times in particular make change easier. When we actively want to make change because we've thought through the idea of it, it's a very different story than what I'm going to talk about. These 3 changes, or times, I should say, that we are most likely to change in our life, sort of give us like an open door, a new chapter, an open window for us to leap through and make the change more easily, more comfortably. The first one is what I call life transitions. So generally, when we go through some sort of time in our life where we feel like there is a new chapter, so if we go off to college, or if we get married, or if we move to a new city, those are sort of simple times in our life that really are easy for us to make change because our circumstances, our environment, the people we're surrounded by, all are different. And so we have sort of, again, that open window for us to kind of jump through and make a change. The second time that we're kind of likely to make a large change is when we feel like we've gone through something that's sort of an epiphany. So, for instance, if you think about 9/11 as a good example, a lot of people saw that as, oh my gosh, life is so short, and I need to live life in a different way. And so we kind of have this epiphany that something catapults us into a new state of thinking. And that's, again, another easy window to jump through. The third time is usually when we go through some sort of loss or misfortune. So we lose our job, we lose our spouse, we lose a friend, we get divorced, or we fall against hard times. So let's say even things like Katrina or Sandy, major catastrophes cause major loss in our lives. Those sort of, again, catapult us into a new situation where we're forced to change because it's only going to help us be happier and better in the future.
Brett, what you just listed are what so many of us call those forks in the road, where you can either go one direction that changes everything for you, or you can go the other way where you literally wallow in self-pity and the why me mode, and you get stuck. So what is it that someone needs to do to recognize, like you said, that this is an opportunity for tremendous growth and reinvention, and actually take the steps necessary to succeed?
Well, I think that a lot of people tend to go through something like self-pity. And the positive attitude is what's really going to help you stay on course. The more we let our negative thinking get in the way, the more we let sort of regret. So, if we went through something that we wish we could have changed in the past, the more we get stuck thinking about all of the buts and the ands and the whys we can't, the less likely we're going to be able to move forward. So instead of thinking about the past or thinking about the things that are holding us back, it's important to focus on the positives and the things that can help propel us forward.
So, Brett, how do we know that we're truly ready to make these life changes?
Well, the biggest thing is that you need to really want to make the change. If you don't want to make a change, you're not ready. A lot of people will, let's say, want to lose weight, or at least they think they do. And so they want to go on a diet, or they want to change the way they're eating so that they can, or they want to go, let's say, to the gym. All these things are very typical. But if you're doing so more because you feel you should, or because you have to, or because a loved one is sort of forcing you to want it, that's not a true want on your own behalf, and that want is what's really going to keep you motivated to continue driving through the harder times and the roadblocks that you may face in making any change. So you really have to understand deep down if it's something you want, and then once you have that and you say, yes, this is a change I really want, you have to really get a strong understanding of yourself, and that's sort of what we talk about in the book, A Whole New You. We talk about a lot of self-awareness and understanding who you really are and getting to sort of that authentic self and understanding what your authentic self needs are, what your authentic self's wants are, and your desires, so that you can make judgments and decisions predicated on who you really are versus on what other people expect you to be.
Brett, you just mentioned your book, A Whole New You, and in that book, you've outlined 6 steps that someone can follow to begin this new journey, and you just touched upon identifying a need and discovering yourself. Then you say that it's important to design a vision. What does that mean?
Well, a lot of us want to make changes, but we don't know where to begin. And sometimes, so the book, in a sense, outlines a structure for people. And the first step really in making your change, not just deciding you want to make the change, but actually physically making it, is to create a vision. What is the future state? And your vision, there's a lot of things that can sort of play into it, but, there's things like looking at yourself when you're 80. What are you going to hope that you've achieved? Understanding sort of your overall vision for life. Like what do you want to get out of life? How do you want to live your life? What are your values? All of those things sort of end up feeding into what your life vision could be. And that vision is what's going to sort of drive you to then take the other steps that are important in transformation.
So once you have a vision, then you say that it's important to create a plan. And how structured do you think this plan needs to be? And do you allow people the opportunity to really understand that? And where I'm getting at with this is when I talk to people about the importance of creating a life plan, I also explain to them that life isn't from A to Z, that sometimes you go from A to Q to P to M to L, but when you put it all together and juggle it, you get that alphabet from A to Z. So when you tell people to create a plan, do you tell them that you need to be very structured in your planning, or do you allow them the opportunity to deviate from it when necessary?
It's very individual, and so for some people, plans they need to be very highly structured to actually be effective, while other people tend to be much more flexible in their thinking. They see things in grays, not just black and whites. And so you need to be flexible. Flexibility is key, because if something in your plan isn't working, let's say you map out this beautiful plan from, today through 6 months, and you've dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's, but somewhere along the line, as you're going through your plan, you're not working, you're not moving forward. That's when you need to revisit your plan, understand why it's not working, and change it if necessary. And it also depends on the change or transformation you're trying to make. Some people can, get through steps 1 through 3, let's say, in their plan very quickly, but maybe may hit like step 4 and start hitting a lot of roadblocks, in which case, there needs to be flexibility with how much time you expect your plan to take, and sort of even the steps within that task or whatever that you're trying to achieve, you being flexible there. So if something isn't working, you really have to be aware and be mindful of what it is that's not working and why, so that you can modify it so that you're successful.
Brett, for people that are creating a plan and perhaps they've had a long-time dream that they finally decided they want to realize, how realistic do you advise people to be? Or do you say go for it, shoot for the stars?
I think there's a little balance of both. I think that, there's a great quote, and I hope I don't mess it up, but it's basically, if you shoot for the stars, or if you shoot for the moon, you'll at least land among the stars. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of us make a lot of excuses as to why we can't do something or why we shouldn't do something. And that holds us back, and that doesn't allow us to dream. If you think about children, they have huge dreams. They want to be astronauts. They want to be president of the United States. They're always very lofty dreams and goals. And somewhere along the line, we become overly realistic, and we decide not to go for those dreams. And maybe they change just because we don't want to be president of the United States. Mm-hmm. But, understanding that, if you don't allow yourself to dream, then you're not going to push yourself and challenge yourself to be all that you can be and be the best that you can be. So I think that there has to be a lot of dreaming, but also a little bit of rationality that goes along with it, so that you understand that if something isn't working, somewhere along the line you can say, you know what, it was a dream and I really wanted it to come true, and I gave it my best, but in reality it's not going to happen, and I just have to understand that and accept it. So I think there's a happy balance there.
Do you think fear is the number one roadblock for most people?
Fear is a huge roadblock for people. There are several that I really tend to talk most about, fear being the biggest. I also think that regret and getting stuck, as we talked about before in the past, is a huge one as well. But the fear is something that we all experience, and it's just how we deal with fear and how we deal with past failure, which is another roadblock that I think people tend to get stuck with. And how we deal with those two things that allow us to move forward. We can either learn from them and get something out of those experiences that are positive, or we can dwell in the negative, again, as we mentioned earlier, and that will hold us back.
Do you think people have a better chance for success, long-term success, if they make small, steady changes, or if they go for something major all at once?
Well, given that I wrote the book, 52 Small Changes, I think that kind of answers the question. I totally believe in small changes. If you look at, I think it's important to keep the big picture in mind, but if you try to tackle it all at once, you're going to become overwhelmed and often be, disillusioned and give up. While if you can look at that big goal and sort of break it down into chunks and achieve things along the way, you're going to constantly feel motivated, because with every success that you have, you're going to feel more inspired and motivated to move forward with new challenges and new steps in your process. But also, and you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to feel like you're actually succeeding, which is important. But you're also going to see results along the way. If you're only looking at the big goal, you're waiting for that big goal to happen, and you're not necessarily seeing all of the things that you have to go through that it takes to get to that big goal.
See, Brett, sometimes I actually know the answers to my questions before I ask them.
I'm not surprised.
There's a method to my madness. Brett, in your book, you write about the dimensions of well-being. What are these dimensions, and how relevant are they for us?
Well, I think a lot of people, when they think about happiness, they tend to focus on one aspect of their life. And the reality is our life is made up of so many different things. So the dimensions of well-being sort of give people an opportunity to think about not just the one thing that they think they want to change, but what else might be affecting that specific area. So let's say you do want to lose weight. I keep going back to this, but it's an easy one. Let's say you want to lose weight. There's a very good chance that, although that's a physical thing, there may be things that are factoring into why you are overweight in the first place that have nothing to do with your health or your physical health. So the dimensions of well-being include your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, your career well-being, your social well-being, intellectual and spiritual well-being. And so a lot of these dimensions often can play with one another and cohabitate in some of the things that you're trying to tackle. So for the example of losing weight, a lot of us struggle with emotional eating. And so that piece needs to be considered when you're thinking about making your transformation, because if all you do is look at the physical aspects, you may never succeed because you didn't look at the emotional aspects. So really taking care and purpose to understand all of the different things that are going to contribute to your success is important.
The book is A Whole New You, 6 Steps to Ignite Change for Your Best Life by Brett Blumenthal. Brett, if our listeners would like more information about you and your work, where can they go?
They can go to my website, which is Sheerbalance.com, SHEER balance.com. I also have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Sheerbalance, and a Twitter handle, which is basically twitter.com/Brett Blumenthal.
Brett, thank you so much for spending time with us today. As I said in the beginning, so many people today are stuck, whether it be in a dead-end job or a going-nowhere relationship, and they really need some encouragement to take that first step. And your book is a wonderful start, A Whole New You. So thank you for being here with us.
Oh, Joan, thank you so much.
We'll be right back. It's time for this week's Medical Minutes. Joining me today is Dr. Michael Gross, the Medical Director of the Active Center for Health and Wellness, the founder of Active Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, and the Chief of Sports Medicine at Hackensack University Medical Center. Dr. Gross is the author of the new book, Get Well Soon. Welcome, Dr. Gross. Thanks for joining us today.
Joan, thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Gross, now that it's autumn and football is kicking into full swing, with football and many other sports comes the risk of concussion. And I know that this can be a serious problem in our young athletes. So what is a concussion, and what are some of the signs and symptoms that we need to be aware of?
Simply put, a concussion is a traumatic brain injury. It is a mild traumatic brain injury, but nonetheless, it is a brain injury and should be taken very seriously. We're seeing all sorts of stories in the news now about the long-term effects of concussions in professional football players. And we're learning that this is a much more serious injury than we ever thought. What happens is when your head gets hit, the brain moves around inside your head. So if you get hit in the front of your head, the back of your brain will hit against the back of your skull, and it'll bruise, and there'll be some bleeding. And if that continues to happen, you're at risk for permanent brain injury and permanent brain damage.
Doctor, I raised 2 sons, and they were very active boys. And there were times when they banged their heads and they had accidents, and I was always worried about a concussion. Is there the possibility that a concussion can go undiagnosed, or do you always have some type of warning signs that something's happened?
Well, one of the common misconceptions that people have is that there's always a loss of consciousness with concussions, and that's not true. Some of the common problems that people have after a concussion is a headache, difficulty focusing, nausea, vomiting, irritability, difficulty remembering things, sort of a change in mental status. If there are any of those sort of problems, then the athlete should be evaluated by a medical doctor immediately. If in a game situation or a practice situation there is a suspicion of a concussion, the athlete should not be allowed to continue playing until they've been evaluated and until they're symptom-free. In the old days, when I used to play football, we used to talk about getting our bell rung. The trainer would look at you on the sidelines, ask you what day it is, and if you could answer that question, you'd go back in and play more. And now we know that may not be the best approach.
If a parent gets a diagnosis about a concussion of his or her child, what's next? What does the parent need to know?
The parent needs to know to watch the child carefully for any changes in mental status. If they are deteriorating, they need to go immediately to the emergency room, and they need to be followed up by their medical doctor. Kids should not be allowed to return to play until they're symptom-free. And by symptom-free, we don't only mean that when they're sitting around at the dinner table that they feel okay. They should be allowed to do some mild exercise and see if that causes a return of their symptoms. If it does, they need to rest further. If they can do mild exercise, they can be progressed, and if they remain symptom-free, they can return to activity. If somebody has a concussion and they're allowed to return to play too early, they can have something known as a second blow syndrome, which can even lead to sudden death. So it's very important that athletes are not allowed to return to play until they've healed.
Doctor, are there things that we can do to prevent this type of injury?
Well, a lot of work is being done with different kind of helmets and headgear and all of these sorts of things. And so far, we haven't found a perfect answer. In football in particular, we've changed the way kids are taught to block. They're not supposed to spear. They're not supposed to hit with their heads. There's a whole school of hitting now called heads up. And the coaches are taught and certified that they can teach this properly. Also, what a lot of the schools are doing what's called cognitive testing before the start of a season, so that if there is a question of head trauma, of a concussion, the children can be retested and we can compare the results and see if there's a change. If there's a decline in cognitive function, in brain function, we don't allow them to go back to sports until they've returned to normal.
If you'd like more information about this or other sports-related topics, you can visit Dr. Gross's site, activeorthopedics.com, and to learn how to achieve true wellness in your life, get a copy of Dr. Gross's book, Get Well Soon. It's available on Amazon.com. Dr. Gross, thank you for being here with us. As always, it's a pleasure to have you.
Joan, thank you very much for inviting me.
We'll be right back.
An apple a day helps keep the fat away. The weather turns cooler and the leaves begin to change color. Autumn is in full swing, and with it comes a bountiful harvest of apples. This is a season to pull out the spices and whip up delicious apple recipes. Hi, I'm Chef Todd, your healthy cooking expert. Apples are extremely beneficial to your health. They help prevent cancer and heart disease, lower cholesterol, provide anti-inflammatory protection, and promote weight loss. New research indicates that they may help prevent Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. If you're looking for a healthy alternative to fat or sugary desserts, stewed apples make an excellent option. Easy to prepare, stewed apples work well as a slightly sweet topping or as a dessert by itself. Or top your favorite poultry dish such as grilled boneless chicken breast or grilled turkey cutlets. Add a few sun-dried cherries and cranberries for some tartness. You can also add a dash of cinnamon and nutmeg to enhance the flavor. For recipes and cooking tips, visit cookingwithcheftodd.com.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that this information is for educational purposes only and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, you can visit our website, CYACYL.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, take part in the book club, sign up for the mailing list, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.